Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 159. I'm talking to Jack Lloyd, who is the creator of the Voluntaryist comic book series. We're going to talk about comic books, libertarian creatives, and Jack is also has his own little. He's also been following Javier Milei for a while, so we're going to get started with that too, because Jack is apparently Milei's character, Captain Ancap, was apparently inspired by one of Jack's comic book characters. At least that's what Jack tells us. So we're going to look into that. So how are you, Jack?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah. I mean, it's just been a wild whirlwind of incredible things, especially in the creative world. We just finished our kids book campaign that was successful. Voluntaryist, as you just mentioned, is rocking. We're getting ready for our next music video campaign. And we're also excited to be promoting and supporting Eric July's Ripperverse latest, title release, Yaira. I mean, it's just killing it. He's raised, I think, $1 million already within less than 24 hours. It's absolutely incredible what we're seeing in the alternative, indie space, pushing back against the mainstream big corporate structures that have ruined most of the beloved characters. So it's pretty amazing.
Yes. This is something I've definitely wanted to do on here, is I definitely want to promote and help out all the libertarian creatives, whether that be comic books, novels, musicians, actors, movie directors, movie producers. It's really a crying shame that 40 years ago that the Kochs didn't start spending or 50 years ago that the Kochs didn't try spending all their money on stuff like this, because they probably would have made more of a difference, and they might have actually made money instead too. But anyway, so Jack, the first thing I want to start off with is, how did you get here? How did you become a voluntarist? How did you become a libertarian? How did you become, what you are today?
Yeah, so originally I was a neoconservative, kind of was the default norm of my upbringing, between being in a conservative Christian household / a Christian school, where that tended to be the thing, the evangelical right. It was kind of just the default settings. I had some intellectual thought with it too, analyzing some things, but it was largely left unchallenged because I didn't really have much any outside experience outside the mainstream left-right divide. That's really was it by and large. Didn't even really get into any specific libertarian-oriented literature till I was an adult, which is surprising. Even many people might come across something from Ayn Rand or Bastiat or Milton Friedman, sometimes in high school, but I didn't. So I didn't explore that till later. So when I was in college, I was in my history class, and they were discussing the American eugenics movement, and I had never heard about that before. I was like, wait, what? I thought this only happened over in Germany. What are you talking about? So it shocked me to hear that in the case of Buck v. Bell, that Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes sentenced Carrie Buck to be forcibly sterilized. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, what? This sounds something like a dystopian novel. Like, how is this in America? So I researched that, and I started to challenge what I knew, because I said, if I didn't know that, what else didn't I know about history? What else was not taught? So that started sending me down this rabbit hole of revisiting, everything I thought, all the presuppositions. It led me to people like Alex Jones back in the day. It was like 2005. So I was watching his stuff, and I was looking at his documentaries, and I started to, go online, look deeper and deeper, and eventually was, coming across different libertarian authors like Lysander Spooner. And I realized eventually that, the lip service I was giving to freedom as a neoconservative was not really the case. I wasn't actually supporting true individual property rights, by saying the government needed to have the strong military that was interventionist and these regulations and things like that. It was a conflict, in my mind. And so as I developed my thoughts and challenged myself, going to like student groups where I discussed ideas and things like that, I moved from being what was a neoconservative toward a big L libertarian to a voluntarist, by the end of 2009, by 2010, essentially. And, one person that, stuck out to me in this journey was this guy named Mark Stevens of the No State Project. He had a question on his website that said, should goods and services be provided at the barrel of a gun? And, that was kind of a big sticking point for me, where I thought to myself, oh, that's a good point. If government's forcing the goods and services, it is by, threat of force. And technically, if you resist, you could be put in jail. I'm like, wow, that's a good point. Is that going to be my ethical line? Right. And I internalized that, and I said, well, yes, I mean, that's really what I want, is I want to have that respect. That should be the case. And so, that kind of solidified for me conceptually, voluntarism. And then once I had that solidified with lots of debate and thought and research, then I felt more confident in me moving toward doing my own forms of activism, and doing silly things like maybe, cosplaying and holding up signs on the road, saying taxation is theft. And then eventually, after I'd finished up a law school, I wanted to do something more significant and creative. And so I started to work on a film treatment for this idea of voluntarist superheroes waking people up and finding the state. And then I realized, a film to do that right costs a lot of money. And I don't know that I could raise that, but I said, I probably could do a comic book, reasonably, way more cheaper. And at least that gets the visuals down, almost like storyboarding. I was already a big nerd, when it came to those things. I'd dress up for different movies, with Batman and Spider-Man, all that stuff. So I switched it over and I started to develop, Voluntaryist into a comic book series, which, now today I have Origins trade paperback, which is a beautiful, full wrap, 192 page comic book, full color, that I also lettered myself with all the issues. That took many years of development and work. But it was, a project of love, and I eventually stewarded it, fixed it, worked through different issues, learned the hard way, and got to the point where, my origins arc, beginning with the canon story that's been going on for over 6 years now, is solid and beautiful. We just successfully fundraised for the next arc's first issue, Suit Saga. And so, during that time, I didn't just do Voluntarist. I was a part of a group called Anarchy Ball, where we used these ball memes that were educational, teaching people about anarcho-capitalism. I worked to produce The Philosopher, who became my wife. And we did a bunch of educational content, music videos, skits, and all that kind of stuff. And I did other things too, like work to create The Honest Teacher, which is an unschooling promotional page, getting kids out of the state schooling paradigm and encouraging parents and helping guide them, about what to do to get their kids out. So many different things that I was doing, and that's just really the tip of the iceberg. Because during that time, I went from a juvenile defense lawyer to a state school teacher to tutoring company owner, while doing all this stuff. And, that has its own wild arc to it as well. So it's kind of hard to encapsulate everything that I do. And so that's why I tend to do what I do through like different lenses, different pages or veins, because it's kind of hard to handle all the things that I'm engaged in if I just put it all into one thing. So I kind of piecemeal it out so people can handle the single issues.
Mark Stevens with the No State Project, is that M-A-R-C or M-A-R-K?
M-A-R-C.
And is that Stevens with a V or Stevens with a PH?
I believe it's S-T-E-V as in voluntarist. V-E-N-S, okay. Mark Stevens.
I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. So if anybody wanted to look that up, they could look it up and just. And you are married. Yes. And you are married to she was Pho Chan, who also goes by the Pholosopher. P-H-O, Philosopher. Yes.
Right, like the Vietnamese noodle dish, pho. Yeah.
Yeah, pho. Yeah. That's a noodle dish. Yeah, because her parents are from. They're from Southeast Asia, right? And apparently they fled the communists there. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct. That after the persecution that took place over with the communist takeover and all of this stuff. Her family eventually were like, yeah, we got to get out of here. So they fled.
Well, that's certainly, she's probably got a lot of stories to tell herself anyway.
Yeah.
So you created your Voluntarist, and apparently you found out several years ago that and apparently this is when you also found out about Javier Milei, that they were copying your character. Is that right? When was this?
So no, they weren't copying my character. Lilia Lemone, she was a famous cosplayer in Argentina. She was looking to create a costume for Javier because she's also herself a maker. So when she was searching up symbols and ideas, she came across a Voluntarist. So when she was researching, like, oh, okay, is there anything out there that exists already? I want to figure out some ideas. She came across my comic book series. And so she let me know. She's like, hey, by the way, have you heard of Javier Milei? I was working to like create his costume, and I researched and I found your comic. He's awesome. Basically in doing her, I guess you could say, research into ideas for the costume, she came across Voluntaryist. And I think that certainly played a part in inspiring possibilities or thinking what to do different, distinguish it from Voluntaryist. So that was super cool to see, and back then, I had no idea how big he would eventually blow up to be, because, those years ago, he wasn't running for office. He was just this kind of celebrity guy, economist, who would go around and like smash a pinata, of the central bank and do crazy things, telling people how bad socialism is and how bad state central planning is. So I just thought it was really cool when I looked into it. It's like, oh, okay, this guy's pretty legit. All right, that's awesome. So like, great, another fellow cosplayer, liberty lover who wants to teach people economics and ethics. This is great. Didn't think too much of it outside of there in terms of the political arena, because again, it wasn't really on the horizon then that, oh, okay, this guy's going to run to try to be president. So that was a big surprise later on when it's like, oh, okay, he's actually doing this. Like, nice.
Yeah, definitely. That was, how long ago was that?
Nearly 5 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Lilia Le Moine.
Yes, the Spanish.
The Diputada Nacional por la Provincia de Buenos Aires por la Libertad Avanza. So she is the national deputy in the province of Buenos Aires for La Libertad Avanza. You can look her up on Twitter. She's got a picture of herself with wearing a red jacket, but there looks like a Superman T-shirt underneath. It's kind of interesting. She's definitely a recognizable lady, and she's also pretty damn good looking too. But a lot of women down there are. So yeah, so she's been one of Milei's marketing team. So yes, so that was when you found out about Milei. So what have you been noticing about Milei since then in the last 5 years?
Yeah, just that, it seems like as if what he did, from my perspective, and I do stick out from a lot of people try to say, oh, he's this populist guy. I'm like, you have no idea what there's nothing populist, appealing to the common senses, sentiments of people when he did his work. He actually was extraordinarily, I guess you could say, contentious and pushing back against the common culture, because the culture actually was accepting of this like Peronist socialist mentality. And it was actually him challenging people and doing the economics education that changed minds. And what people don't realize about that is that that's just how deeply ingrained it was, that even with things being so bad, a lot of people were like, but what's better kind of thing. They didn't think outside of state central planning. So he was brought on in many of these different TV shows and news networks, because a lot of times they would just think that they could mock him, right? They thought, oh, this guy's not serious. He's just this silly lunatic. Let's just bring him on our shows and we'll, make fun of him or this or that. And then he'd come on and school these people with his, firebrand energy and sit there and teach them economics and call them out and be like, no, what you're doing is monstrous. You are literally, cutting off people's legs and arms. You don't have the moral high ground. So he stood strongly on that. It wasn't simply a comparative better argument thing. He was literally saying, you socialists are evil. Like you are literally, moral scum. So he was actually there changing minds, and he changed enough minds over time that he was able to create kind of a fan base, right? Because, when you're doing politics, you need at least a strong group of people who is your diehard fans who will then, do the legwork for you, promoting you, door knocking, whatever else. So he developed that. And then he got to a point where he had enough of that fan base that they helped push him and do that legwork, that he'd get to the wider culture to get the 15 million people say, okay, you know what, we'll give this guy a try. That, it just is worth, giving this guy a chance. And by doing that, it increased his publicity. And then all of a sudden people started to search up what he was talking about and what books he was recommending. And people are starting to read, Human Action from Mises, even bus drivers and things like that. And people, just living their lives are engaging with these ideas. So I noticed that it's not what people think, that, oh, he just is playing to this common sentiment. No, he challenged the entire status quo, or the status quo. And he said, I have the moral high ground, that I'm going to teach you the truth about state central planning, and I'm going to call it the socialists, and I'm going to help you value freedom. no matter what, carajo. So that's what makes him unique to me, is that he was not pandering. He was actually teaching people and being so, I guess you could say, energetic, to the point that he was getting people to feel moved. He was actually so passionate that he was getting people to actually change, and on the inside, to be open to his ideas. I think that's incredible.
So yeah, so are you fluent in Spanish, Jack? I should ask you that or not.
I had 3 years of Spanish in high school. I've been to Costa Rica, I've been to Spain, but my Spanish is a little rusty. I can read some things. I can get around, maybe, where's the bathroom? ¿Dónde está el baño? But I could, but I would definitely want to study a bit more if I were to go over and try to talk to people.
well, I mean, Jack, ever since last August, I've been asking the question, what is Javier Milei doing that other libertarians are not doing? Because he's obviously having his successes 100 times anybody else's. There's nobody who comes close to having the kind of success that he's had. And I'm just wondering, it's the question of, how do we copy this?
Mm-hmm.
What can we learn from this? I mean, I think we need to study this as much as we possibly can.
He has a lot of good things going for him. He has the academic credentials, because he is actually a professional in economics, and he has the academic credentials. He has the work history and the work product, because he's worked in different things as an economist, from being teacher to applying it within organizations and stuff like that. And he's not like young. He's not some 30 something. He's he's in his 50s. So he's had the time to showcase his knowledge. He's had the time to show that he's been consistent. And with that, professional credibility, though, he doesn't just lead it there and become some, snore or some boring person. He did things to be, energetic and challenging, and kind of extreme and zany at times, with how he'd present himself. He created spectacle to get people to pay attention to him. And he let his emotions flow through, instead of this, I'm going to be civil and I'm just going to talk like Democrats do in America when they're politicians. They try to be like, see, I'm very civil as I call for bombings in the Middle East, right? So they have this false air of propriety, and civility, while being, murderers and thieves. So he instead did the opposite, which is, I'm going to be firebrand, and I'm going to, castigate people who are trying to enslave you and steal from you. And I'm going to do so in an entertaining way that you just can't turn away from. It's that, kind of captivating. So I think that's what needs to be taken from it, is that we need people who are credible. They have at least some, background that shows, they have the knowledge, they have work product. So they've, applied themselves in different ways, whatever that shows that. And then they need to be very exciting and draw lots of energy and draw people with spectacle, while then teaching people afterward, the economics lessons, right? They do the things that gets people attention, and then they go and they, or he would. And then, so we should teach people the economics lessons and the ethics lessons. That's what's to take away. And I think that as long as politicians here continue to play the who's the most civil game, and I'm going to wear my tie and just try to look, straight-laced, and sound all proper, it's just a losing proposition, because the mainstream parties can play that game all day, right? They can try to look the most formal and look the most, educated and proper. And I think, Javier, I think, also aligns with the aesthetic, again, not principles, but the aesthetic conceptually with Trump. Not, again, by his actions, but the idea that someone is being an entertainer, someone is doing something more than just being a talking head. Someone is being, firebrand and pushing back against evil. And Trump did that brilliantly, right? Before he did anything politically, he was doing business. He was heavy into media and entertainment. He had shows. If he can get himself into anything, he would, right? From Home Alone to whatever. He wanted to be in the culture, right? He wanted people to see his name everywhere. And I think that is something to learn from, right? How are you making yourself culturally relevant? How are you getting yourself into different types of media opportunities and exciting people, right? I think that that's just something to take away, that you can't be shy and you can't just be, stiff. You have to be someone who conveys emotion and passion for your values in a way that gets, people excited, and then calls out and mocks the evilness, of state central planning, of state violence and socialism. So I think that's what Javier Milei did well. He's not the only person who has played to this kind of thing, because Trump did as well. He played to that kind of showmanship, media, personality thing. I'm going to be an entertainer. And that needs to be just considered, that people want to see something that inspires them and excites them and makes them feel emotionally moved. Because, with politics, unfortunately, people at large, sadly, don't value logic and reason, in a cold fashion, right? It's sometimes hard to get people to hear a cold, dry argument in and of itself. They need something that connects them to their heart. And then, even if they're more emotionally driven, then at least they open up to listening to you about your ideas. And then you can, lead into the argument and the reason once you've captivated their hearts. So.
Yeah. And of course, part of the problem is Trump doesn't believe anything. So that's one thing. So there are quite a few differences. Also, I don't know if Trump captured the youth base as much as Milei has.
Trump certainly captured the conservative Republican youth, but yes, he. I would say it's a little different. Where at least from what I understand, what I've seen, and I've seen some videos and I've heard some on the ground reports, Javier Milei seems to have a broader base of support across the youth. Like, as in, like, culturally, there isn't as much of a divide about liking him. Like, he is like a popular figure, like a celebrity to the youth generally, not just only to one side. Like, he's kind of, branched out to where young people more generally are looking up to him.
Yeah, and of course, Trump actually has an ideology and a belief system, whereas Trump has absolutely positively nothing. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know what Trump believes on anything, really, with the exception of a few issues. I mean, he
believes in his power and his prestige. He wants, from my understanding and my, whatever connections, insights I have, he wants to be viewed as a great man. He wants to be viewed as someone who people worship because they love him.
Yes.
Again, that doesn't tell you anything about his ethics and underlying principles. It just tells you his outcome orientation. He wants that for himself.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he doesn't have the economics principles grounded and the ethics principles grounded to actually make that happen for good reasons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not based on virtue.
Yeah, I think Milei has all those principles. I don't think Milei just wants to be, I don't think Milei just wants to get on TV because he's a narcissist and wants to show off. I think he cares about, I think he wants to leave the world better off than when he found it. And the impact is just, the impact right now is just amazing. I hope it grows elsewhere, And anything else you've noticed or anything else you've observed? I mean, over the last 5 years?
Well, I'd say certainly with Javier Milei, he certainly enjoys being in the spotlight. It's, performative.
Yeah.
The act of doing that means that he enjoys the attention. But I would say I agree with you in the core, which is that he cares about the ideas. Like that, he's doing the spectacle and he enjoys the limelight, but he is there for the ideas, right? If he wasn't, it would just be all about him, worship me. But he's at every opportunity talking about the ideas of liberty and the economics, right? And his passion is for those things. And that consistency shows that, right? So regardless of whatever things he might get personally and pleasure of being on TV or being in the radio, he consistently gives that message of liberty across the board, and every opportunity he's giving it. So to me, that shows someone who values that as his priority. His priority is spreading the message of liberty and getting people to understand those ideas and to reject the leftist state socialist, planning, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, certainly it's, but so far it's certainly done well. This is so yeah. And of course he's created Captain Ancap, and that's, which you can go out there and see. And it's, there definitely are similarities between Jack's voluntarist character and Captain Ancap. So, yeah. So
Voluntaryist has been going on for a long time, because Voluntaryist came out in 2012. So and to a degree, long before Javier was really getting out there in the public eye. I would say 2013, 14 was when Javier started to really move in a more public eye fashion, in terms of his publicity. So happy to lead the way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So that's where I wanted to go over in this jack up. So, when have you always had an interest in comic books? I mean, what first got you started in comic books? And you obviously you thought comic books were cheaper than making movies, which is true. So, but what kind of comic books did you like? Did you read a lot of comic books growing up, whether it be superheroes or maybe even Mad Magazine, or
I did have some Mad magazines. I mean, for me, comic books were never a thing where I had the subscription. I'm like, I'm getting every month's DC or Marvel thing. I always had comic books, a comic book collection. I got certain things that I liked, whatever it is, maybe a certain Superman comic, or, I was big into the Death of Superman series. I liked the Amalgam comics, the crossover between Marvel and DC. Those were cool. I liked Invincible when that first came out, and I read, those comics early on. But I would say I was especially into watching the animated shows because, as a kid, I maybe couldn't afford buying comics all the time, but I could certainly watch, on Saturday morning or Saturday evening cartoons, Batman, the animated series, Uncanny X-Men, Static Shock, things like that. So I certainly enjoyed that. I enjoyed watching whatever movies I could. I had on VHS, I had the original Superman movies from the 40s, that kind of thing. So as a kid, there was only so much that I could do with it, whatever my allowance could afford and whatever I could scrounge up or get my parents to get me. So I just enjoyed whatever I could, as I could. And I still have, a comic book collection to this date that has some of my favorite things, from a first issue of like the Max and different things. Like I have Watchmen, which is definitely a favorite of mine. I have that whole graphic novel, but for me, comics were always just more so something that I had for my favorite novelty items. And if I were to be reading anything else otherwise, I might read cartoon strips in addition to that. Like I'd read Calvin and Hobbes, The Far Side, and things like that too.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and sometimes those certainly have some messages. And when you say Superman, do you mean the TV series with George Reeves, or?
So back, and I have seen that as well, but
Yeah.
the Superman VHS and stuff like that I had growing up were the old cartoons. I think it was in the 40s that they were made. We're talking. It was in color, but it's some of the earliest Superman cartoons. With a little bit more simplified Superman.
Okay.
Yeah.
More recently, since you brought up Superman, I got to ask. More recently, what'd you think of Smallville?
Oh, okay. So Smallville, I watched. I don't think I've seen.
Not a comic book, but definitely a
right with Tom
Welling long-running series. And
yeah, I enjoyed Smallville. Overall, I don't think I've seen every single episode. I certainly have seen at least a couple seasons back when it was, first coming out. That's, of course, a long time ago, with Tom Welling. So, and I also would watch with Dean Cain. What was it? The Adventures of Superman, with Clark Kent. That whole thing. So I watched that on TV when that came out too, back when I was younger.
Yeah. I thought Smallville was certainly one of the better, more interesting spins on Superman because it just dealt with Superman in his high school days. But
yeah, that was fun. Yeah. I enjoyed that. Yeah,
he hadn't developed all his powers, so I thought that was a well done. They certainly made it interesting. So, any other comic books or any other influences you might want to mention here? Or?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of what I'd say, one of my favorite comic books in terms of art styles was definitely Invincible with Otley and Kirkman. I just thought Invincible was an incredible series, and the artwork was gorgeous. Certainly, one of my top favorites. Of course, it is an independent comic thing, but with Image, but it's certainly mainstream more than ever, of course. Certainly one of my favorites of all time. And, Watchmen was certainly a favorite of all time. And, Yeah, I mean, I think that, when it comes to my comic book fandom, it just ties more holistically to, everything that I like to watch as a total, right? Because of course, saw Watchmen adaptation in theaters, and watched all the Batman movies in theaters, and Spider movies, the Iron Man movies, all that good stuff. And so it just is, yeah. It was always just a fun thing, just a part of what I loved in nerdom, and I dressed up for Fantastic Four, dressed up as Darth Vader um, for the Star Wars films, when they were doing those first 3 episodes. So just always was engaged in nerdom culture and all that good stuff. So
That's interesting. Did you go to any cons or any events like that, or Comic Con, Dragon Con, or any of those other big? There's some
yeah,
big ones out there.
when I was a young kid, I didn't get to go to much. There was only one convention I think I went to, was the Big Apple Comic Con. And I think that was in '98 that I went. Um, and then past that, I've been to Dragon Con, I've been to MegaCon, I've been to Tampa Comic Con, and I have not been to the big San Diego Comic Con. But yeah, it's something I like and enjoy. And definitely like to go to, especially now more than ever, because now I'm gearing up to try, fingers crossed, table for Voluntaryist at a comic convention. So we applied to go to a comic convention table. We'll see how that goes. But it's fun to go and, and actually be a part, someone who's actually, an artist there. That's kind of fun. And I did MetroCon as well. That was an anime convention, a big one. I emceed that one actually back in the day. So.
Yeah, I used to. Yeah, I actually got started volunteering on MarCon when I lived in Columbus, Ohio, and it seemed like it was more fun when you worked it. Just maybe got more connected. And MarCon went over 50 years. I think they did recently stop. I don't know what happened. The coronavirus nonsense hurt the cons a lot. Also, I got to say too, the World Trade Center hurt the cons a lot.
Mm.
I remember specifically that the MarCon's highest attended MarCon ever was May of 2001. And after that, attendance fell off a cliff because people didn't feel comfortable traveling with their costumes and stuff like that. So
Right.
attendance, yeah, it was kind of sad to see it happen. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, it's been a very interesting thing to watch though with all these events that people go to. I've what do you think was the most inspiring thing that you enjoyed or liked about what really attracted you to a comic, or what really turned you off from a comic?
Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, and this applies also to anime as well, because I like anime quite a bit. But I really enjoy thinking through powers and power scalings. Common thing, right? Thinking about, okay, what does this character have the ability to do? What's their weaknesses? Could they beat this one versus that one? How are they gonna pair up against this person? What's their best case scenario, worst case? So that was always fun, was thinking through, how does each character fare in different situations, and how could they be successful, and making that intelligent, and not going too Toon Force where it becomes just like Looney Tunes, but keeping it within reason, where it's like, okay, I can see how they could do this, that kind of thing. So that's something I do with Voluntaryist, is I bring to bear all my favorite concepts when it comes to powers and power scaling, and things I've wanted to do, and things that have never been done before. So as far as I know, and I have quite a survey of the literature between comics and anime, but the power scaling and the powers that I have with Voluntaryist, conceptually, the backdrop to it is unique, hasn't been done before as a concept. And so, it gives me a chance to have that, like, okay, how do different people fare against each other? And, how would somebody, power up, or how would they look? How would they change? That kind of thing. And what's, the rationale, like what is behind it? That is something special that inspires me, whether it's, Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Super Z, whatever, or watching, Justice League on TV and thinking about the different characters and their powers, that kind of thing.
There seems to be so you prefer you like a hero has a few flaws, or you want your hero to be perfect and invincible, but if your hero is perfect and invincible, the where's the conflict, you know?
Right, exactly. So in order to make a good story, you need to have some types of weaknesses. It doesn't even have to be necessarily power
Yes.
weaknesses. Technically, you could have psychological weaknesses, you could have personality weaknesses, character conflict weaknesses. There's lots of ways to play those things. But yes, without arcs of growth and without the ability to overcome challenges, a story falls flat. The hero's journey thing, is a common trope of framing those types of things. Rising up and then having an issue, and they fall back, like, oh, they failed, and they got to figure out how to overcome it, and then they overcome it, that whole thing. I think that drives this genre, of course, is you need to have struggle, you need to have people have conflict, and to figure out how to overcome that. Otherwise, it's just watching someone watch the paint dry. There's nothing exciting about a story if there isn't a problem that needs to be figured or solved. I mean, certainly there are people who like slice of life movies or something like that, or whatever. But what really excites people is seeing difficulties and seeing how people can overcome or work together or use their minds or use reason or relationships to overcome difficulties. I think that's what makes people feel satisfied. Even if somebody fails, at least there was an attempt, and if people find that satisfying and relatable. So it's definitely what I bring into Voluntaryist, is that constant question of mystery unveiling and wondering how problems are going to be solved, and wondering what's the next issue, and how are they going to work to figure this out. So
Do you all think it's important that you hear in a lot of stories that at least some of them, the heroes have to abide by some kind of code or some kind of law,
mhm.
where you have a very clear boundary between good and evil.
Yes.
And I'm reminded, for example, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. One of the rules of Buffy's universe was she's not allowed to kill humans, no matter how bad the humans are. She's only allowed to kill, I mean, what do you think about how important do you think morality is in these superhero stories?
Well, I like to say that every single story has a base level of what would be considered morality or politics, because the virtues of the characters are shown, and the norms of what is considered acceptable are shown. And whether those things are challenged or left unchallenged inherently imputes a sense of right or wrong, with a story. Even if there's lots of different bad characters, the ending results always still lead to a suggestion about what might be right or wrong, most typically. So in my stories, I definitely have a sense of right and wrong. There is a much different sense of it than the mainstream comics, because unlike most comic stories or any fictional story where the government is viewed as either generally good, or there's a tyrannical government that needs to be stopped, or maybe there's just a few bad apples, right? And once you get rid of the bad apples, okay, government's magic and magical and great. My story has that norm flipped on its head. Government is not considered a default good, and that type of norm could be jarring for people. It's not preachy or anything. My story is very much a typical story in that it's about the characters and developments and conflicts and personalities. It's not some preachy thing, but certainly the characters and the conflicts revolve around the nature of the state and the violence of the state in a way that it's not excusing the nature of statism. It's not simply saying, oh, okay, the government just, have some bad apples and we got to get rid of those bad apples, or, oh, this is just a tyrannical government, we need a more democratic government, and then there'll be peace. And these themes, they're rampant in other comic book series, knocking anarchy or knocking voluntarism essentially, or praising state central planning. Even in Invincible, there's panels that were talking about how free college and free healthcare was a good thing, that the government finally was able to do something, and it was just done in passing, in the Invincible comics. But it would just go past someone's mind, because like, oh, okay, I guess that's fine, right? To someone who's just a normie, or who even likes that, maybe they're progressive, whatever. So my series doesn't do that, of course, by any measure. And the challenges and questions revolve around challenging state power and statism. And they certainly drive at the question of how, you're going to get to true freedom. What does it mean to be truly free? As it says here in the back of the trade paperback, what does it mean to be truly free? That's a big driving force behind my series is that question of what it means. And so, every conflict revolves around that big theme while still staying local to here's the, events and personal conflicts and issues that are going on among the main characters.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. Yeah. Do you have any situations, where sometimes, you have a character who takes a turn, whether it be Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader or maybe, going the other way? And what's usually the common theme there?
Sure. So the question of whether there are characters who might have personal conflicts and question which direction they'll take. Certainly, that is a part of the story. Those conflicts and issues have not percolated yet, since we're still, early on in the series relatively, even though I do have a lot of comic book pages down. This is a huge series that's ever expanding. So those types of conflicts certainly will come up, and there will definitely be questions of people wondering which direction they take and why, and consequences therefrom as well, based on which direction they take.
Certainly, yes. So, yeah. Have you branched out into any other forms, or is you just going to focus on comic books?
For Voluntaryist, the comic book is the main thing. We've done live action trailers. We've done, kind of a comic motion trailer. We're working actually on an animated trailer right now for the next campaign that'll be coming up later this year. So we're certainly trying to expand our creative outlets and opportunities. In the past, I have made other merch as well. We did do some prototype action figures and some rare stuff that people got back then. I'm not really doing too much of that right now because the cost is a bit high to do a mass production right now, and I'm not ready for that. And so I'm just mostly focused on the comic book series itself, some art that's related to it, little odds and ends of merch that, tangentially relate to just designing out the universe further, just because there is so much to do, even though we've already covered so much, ground in terms of the origin story. So I tend to just devote my resources in the comic book production process toward developing the comic book series, and right now also branching out within there, because Voluntaryist is the main line story, but there is opportunity for other characters. And so we have our first other character story currently in pre-production development. The cover was just finished for this next standalone series, and the script's been written for quite an extensive portion of that series. So certainly there are going to be other comic books within Voluntaryist within the universe, much like you have the Justice League and X-Men, and you can have standalone comics for the individual characters within those groups. It's the same thing with Voluntaryist, where there will be side stories, or I guess you could say precursor stories, where you show a character's development leading into the series, potentially, especially where that character's development is a little more significant and important to develop independently. So we have all that, in the hopper, in addition to continuing the Voluntaryist canon story. So we're just trying to expand as much as possible.
Sounds like you're getting a lot of good work done. One thing I've got to ask too is, are most of your comic book sales still, the old-fashioned comic books that we would buy 50 years ago, or are you also getting, have comic books been translated well into, the electronic book format?
Yeah, I mean, I have certainly the ability for people to buy it in digital on Amazon or digital on Indie Planet. I'd say most of the sales come from the physical issues, because, typically when it comes to artwork and stuff like that, people want to have, the
Yes.
physical comic book in hand and be able to see that cool artwork and show that off or put it in a collection. So definitely we got both. We have digital, we have physical, but most of the time people really want to have the physical because the artwork's cool and it itself is something that they want to hold on to and cherish. So.
Yeah, you have as I say, a visual experience. It's not like you don't. Yeah, it's not like when you have a novel or just writing a novel.
Right. Yeah. It's both, the written word in terms
Yeah,
of the dialogue monologues, plus you get to have a visualization of what I want people to see, at least as best as I can with working the artist and the level I'm at, getting people to visualize the direction and the scope of what it is that I'm trying to communicate, so that they can then, have that similar experience and know what it is that I'm trying to convey with the designs, as opposed to just maybe, someone imagining it in their head if they read just a written novel, and maybe they have different ideas about what they're seeing in their head. With the comic book format, people get a strong idea of what it is that I want them to see, and they can fantasize beyond that, of course, but at least they have a strong continuous basis from which to think about, okay, this is what the characters kind of look like, this is what the action looks like, and so forth. So
how is it working right nowadays? I know there's you have a lot of print on demand books. I mean, do you have to buy 1,000 comic books and then you sell them and then you put them in your garage and sell them, or how's this working out for you, or what's?
yeah, so with the print on demand that I use from Kablam, they take care of all that. They print any comic that someone wants on demand, so it's printed at point of purchase, and then they handle the shipping. So I don't have to do much on the day-to-day with that. It's all handled by third-party service, and that makes my life way easier because I do not want to be in the business of daily fulfilling comic books. It's not, in my wheelhouse of desire, and I have a lot of other things I have to do with producing other things. So that works out. And then when it comes to the campaigns themselves, then I do buy in bulk because I'm going to buy all the comics that I need to fulfill the campaign, add in the special perks, do signatures and all that stuff. So that has to come to me. So whenever you do a campaign, those comics come to me first for special handling and taking care of the extras and the signatures and all that stuff. And then I ship those out. So that's the only time I really ship out those kinds of, things. It's not going to be on the day-to-day grind.
And do you get out to a lot of conventions and stuff, or not? Or you just kind of stay around home and you're in Central Florida, right? Or
yeah, we're in Florida. Yeah.
yeah,
Most of the conventions that we've gone to with tabling for Voluntaryist have been LP conventions, Libertarian Party conventions. I wasn't ready for comic book conventions because I didn't think I had enough work product to really sit down and have something worthy to showcase. We're there now. So we hit the point where I have enough issues and, trade paperback and all this stuff where I feel comfortable tabling because I think we have enough to really showcase the series and have something that people could be like, oh, okay, I can sink my teeth into this. It's not just like 2 issues are out or whatever. So now we're getting into comic book convention tabling, and we submitted our first opportunity this year. We haven't been approved yet. I don't, know if they will for sure because it's a third-party business. It's up to them. And there's a lot of applicants, but I imagine they would, just generally because it seems like they want money and they want to have people table. Yeah. So it shouldn't be a problem. And we submitted well in advance, like we're talking nearly 9 months ahead of the convention. So we should be, hopefully, fingers crossed, okay. And there's, as always, there's a lot of people who are really into this stuff. I mean, it's been crazy just how many people are going to conventions more than ever. I mean, we were at MegaCon seeing Eric July and the Ripperverse. It was incredibly packed. It was more packed than when I was there in 2014. I mean, it was just shoulder to shoulder. Difficult to even see anything, without people like walking past you, getting your way, because it was just that packed. So it's hype. It's a lot of people are really into it. It certainly has made a comeback since the lockdown and shutdown nonsense. So I think we'll see this continue to grow, especially with indie creators getting in the mix and providing something new that's fresh for people to see.
I guess what I'm wondering about now too is, do you think your comic books are changing minds, or are you already just preaching to the people who are already converted?
I don't know whether it in particular it is totally changing minds or anything like that per se. It's possible that it might lead someone down a path to go look up things and then eventually that research then changes their mind. Because again, my comic book is not really, it's not a preachy comic book. It just has different norms that are kind of established for the basics of how the comic's operating. That said, I have seen that there have been purchasers who were not necessarily like doing it because it was a voluntarist libertarian thing. I've seen my comic series get out to people who are just interested in indie comics, especially through some cross promotions, and I have evidence of that. People giving reviews who got it under those pretenses. It wasn't done because of libertarians or voluntarists or anything like that. They got it because they heard about it through another indie thing and they wanted to check out a new promoted indie comic. So I know that exists and it's out there. And certainly my core base, the people who have supported me for years, and, big thanks to everyone who's been a part of that. Couldn't have done it without you. Have been certainly people who are aligned or who are friends from the inception. Certainly the core base that helped me get to where I am today were those people who also shared my values. But that has transitioned and expanded as the comic series has now grown and become a bit bigger, thanks to the completion of our origins arc and the trade paperback and all the good stuff, and our cross promotion being in other streams, because I've gotten, because of that, to be able to be on other just comic book streams that are indie streams, not necessarily about voluntarism, libertarianism, things like that. So I've gotten to be able to talk about the series to those outside audiences. So I would imagine there's probably something within there from what I've seen, just going on a show, having people buy the comic after the show, that kind of thing. That it's possible that people are checking out things, at least, that they might have not checked out otherwise.
Either past or present, who are some other libertarian creatives that you think have done some really good and important work?
Sure. So, in terms of creativity, certainly Ayn Rand was quite brilliant at what she did. She was amazing in writing her fiction stories. She integrated it with her philosophy as well, even though I don't agree with all of her philosophy, but I certainly am impressed at her polymath level of understanding and engagement, crossing both fiction and nonfiction. That certainly is a big inspiration to me, is wanting to have that, both the fiction and nonfiction cross over, which, I have done with my nonfiction books as well and other projects and productions. Big inspiration there, for her work. If we're talking about modern creators who have done things that are impressive, to me, Eric July certainly comes to mind. He started with music and I started with comics. Then he went to comics and then I did music. So we had this kind of cross parallel. And I've always been impressed by his vocal talents and ability to orchestrate and make music happen. And certainly now with comic books, certainly a huge inspiration. I often look to his work today and study it like someone trying to pass an exam. I'm studying Eric July's work daily and seeing what's working, what's not working, and all that good stuff, because he's just done such an incredible job. So certainly a huge inspiration for me. In terms of music, in the Liberty space, there's few and far between. Otherwise, it's sometimes hard to find a lot of creators. There are others out there, and if we're talking about, okay, what was I used to hearing back in the day? Back in the day, you had Tatiana Moroz and Jordan Page, which are mostly like guitar, and singing people. Not really my style, my genre, but that was who most people knew of if you go back to like 2012, right?
Yeah, and I've had Tatiana on the show. Yeah, so yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they have their unique styles, and they certainly are known. I was, well aware of them well over 10 plus years ago. But if I would say there's one other person who is not very known, but whose music videos certainly I reflect on. And it's rare to find this person, really doing anything these days, but this guy called Conspirituality. So he was this kind of rapper, white looking guy with dreads who did politically oriented music videos calling out, I guess you could say, secret societies and the deep state long before that was a popular thing. We're talking, 12 years ago. And his music videos were really great, visually and in terms of the props he used and the topics. And certainly I was like, yeah, that's the genre of stuff I would like to do. I would like to have my songs be deep songs about the issues and also visually compelling. So that's someone who sticks out to me as being a cool creator. There's another in the comic book space who we basically we're doing our stuff around the same time, and that's Thomas Gorin's A Paranoid American. He is a comic book creator. His stuff, my stuff is liberty focused with a little bit of conspiracy. His stuff is conspiracy focused with a little bit of liberty, right? So his comic books are to me really well done, and they have great histories on different conspiracies as relates to the government and other things like that. Well before people know about Jeffrey Epstein too. So I think that his work has always been something I've been a fan of, and I've looked at and have studied and thought about too. What would I want to incorporate, or how would I do something? Certainly within this space. And one last for the comic, for both an inspiration and a not to do. So the Silver Circle series. This was both a graphic novel and a film that was shot way back, like 2013. And the Silver Circle was supposed to be this idea about a group of people who would use silver rounds to fight the Fed because of inflation. It was like this underground thing. The comic book, was somewhat decent. The film unfortunately flopped because this guy threw $2 million at it, and he used the CGI stuff that just looked horrible, like absolutely terrible. So I was like, okay, don't want to do that. That's not a good way to blow $2 million. He probably should have just spent it on doing an animation instead. Probably would have been better than trying to do the CGI stuff. But he did that because he was himself a graphic CGI designer before, more for the corporate world. And so I think he got tunnel visioned about using his talents in that way. And just a reminder, just like the Ayn Rand live adaptations, the Atlas Shrugged live adaptations, the modern ones, not the old ones from the 50s, which are actually good movies. The new ones were horrible. I mean, they were so bad that they literally, their asset value was written to zero. They were written as total losses. So it's just a reminder to everyone, when you're in the creative space, right? Just remember, choose a medium that you can do well, right? Because what's worse than trying to do something and it's outside of you being able to do it at least somewhat competently. Again, there's always room for learning. Like, you always are going to start somewhere, and you're not going to be the best yet. But don't choose something that's so far outside of your capacity to do right that it just ends up being a huge waste of money and time. Like that, avoid that. That's not a good idea. You know what I mean? Like Tuttle Twins, they did that right. They have great animation. They have professional animators, great production team. Nailed it, right? That's the way to go. When you have the resources, when you have $10 million to throw around, okay, then do it right. But don't try to make something that is way outside your wheelhouse and budget. You will end up just being sad because they'll disappoint people, and then people won't want to support you if you're going to, look like you made something terrible. So,
yeah, and they've done a lot of good work with the Tuttle Twins. That's somebody else I need to bring on here too. I had another guy too, on who was making some Bitcoin games for kids too, which I thought was really cool. Jack, one thing I wonder about is, do you think if a message is too overt that it can turn people off? I mean, if people are going to read this, is this a novel, or is it just, something that's preaching at me? And where do you think you find that balance of, of not, where people realize, is this a novel, or is it just a political? Because I've heard people say that about Ayn Rand. It said they're not really novels, they're just political speeches.
I would disagree. I mean, I've read a few things that Ayn Rand, and most of her work is really not political speech at all. I mean, it's actually just really deep stories, and they're deep fiction. So yeah. I wouldn't agree there. Of course, anyone who's a diehard hater of her message might characterize it as that, but no, certainly not at all. Those are just normal, fictions that just have, again, different norms and ultimate messages, but they're not preachy at all. So I think that's a market issue. So the question is always just, what are you trying to achieve with your work, right? If you put something very on the face, and the more preachy it is, the more likely you're going to alienate readers who might not want that or who just find it too jarring, right? That's just a fact of life. It doesn't matter what politics it is, you're going to have that. Now, of course, if you do that, you also will endear it to those who love it. So if you make something that is right up the alley, like if you make a Trump comic book, right, and it's about Trump and praising him, you'll have lots of leftists who hate it, but you might have Trump lovers who are like, I'm going to get this because it's Trump, right? So it's the same thing with any other thing. You're just picking your market, and you're just going to, narrow your scope based on what it is that you want. So if you want to have the widest appeal, make sure that whatever political or ideological, things that are in there, make them as subtle as possible, right? That's what you have to do, because then people will not be turned off. If you're like me and I'm like, I'm actually doing something where it's technically not preachy, but it just is a little bit strong about the focus, right? Voluntaryist, humanity's last stand against government is more just the premise. It's not a preachy thing. It's just the premise. Inherently, some people will not like that, but on the other side, I have had lots of readers who are like, "There's a great story. I can't wait to see what happens next," because it's actually intriguing and they don't mind it. So, for me, I've always been already doing the educational outreach otherwise. So my other work has always been about building a libertarian future with more minds changed. So voluntaryist and success is literally just a side effect of that, right? The more people come into contact with these ideas, the more minds are changed, the more people are like, I want some entertainment or something that is not just the same old garbage from Marvel and DC. I want something that has, maybe a liberty focus, right? So that's where I see myself. Just like Tuttle Twins, right? Tuttle Twins, their shows are certainly entertaining, but they certainly have a message, right? They certainly talk about entrepreneurship and free markets. So there are goals within there, but you can make something that has goals be entertaining, and you can make it where even someone who's borderline will still rather have their kids watch that than, the stuff that's coming out from Marvel, right? So that's where I see myself. I see myself as being a part of the larger group of people who are providing the alternatives to Marvel and DC. And, how I always see myself is I'd be like, okay, well, if you liked Watchmen or you liked Invincible, you'd probably would like Voluntaryist, in terms of that. It's a little bit more intellectual. It's a little bit more violent and mature in that way. It's not sexual. It's not like a naughty rag book. It's just more, adult oriented, teen plus oriented, due to the nature of the themes, the topics, and of course the action and the violence. So I'm just providing that zone of alternative, for people who are like, I just want something new. I just want something that's like interesting. Something I haven't, you watch like, okay, I've seen the same plot like 10 times already. This is boring, right? I have something that is literally so novel that people are like, oh, finally something fresh. And that's what I think I can stand out on, and why I think I've had some success now more than ever with just people just getting so tired of Marvel and DC just doing the race swaps and the sex swaps and the you're gay now thing. So, people are just like, okay, there's got to be something more interesting than this.
Yeah, definitely people are looking for alternatives, and I think, but that kind of brings us back to the original question, would you rather have a bunch of people who said, yeah, I'm a longtime libertarian, I love your stuff, or would you rather have somebody come up and say to you, hey, I read your comic book and it changed everything for me?
I would like both. I don't think they're exclusive. Yeah. I think that, it's just like reading Atlas Shrugged or reading, Fountainhead or something. You can read a work and have both someone who's a diehard fan of the ideas like it, and you could have someone who reads it who's an outsider and be like, this was a good thought challenge for me. That's what I think Voluntaryist is personally. I think it's something that you read and it makes you go, okay, wait, what's real? What's fiction? And it makes you go, is this something that's actually happening in real life? And I've had people say that already. I enjoyed one comment that I got in a review. Someone was saying that they had no idea about a certain event that took place until they read my comic. They said, oh, I knew a lot about these things, but I didn't know about this thing. And it made me go Google it. And they're like, oh my gosh. So it's kind of fun when you have something that causes someone to both get lost in the fantasy of the story, but then also sit back and go, I wonder what this is about. And, they start looking into things, they go down a rabbit hole. I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of fun. What do you think of what do you think are some good examples of things that were more in the mainstream, but I think had some good libertarian messages. I mean, I definitely think that applies to the Hunger Games. Certainly the movie Dallas Buyers Club. Do you have anything you want to praise with regard to that recently?
Yeah, I don't think there's too much out there that is very fairly Hollywood, unfortunately. But one such thing that is recent that sticks out for me is G-1, which is the best Godzilla movie of all time, in my opinion. I'm a huge Godzilla fan, and I can't even believe I didn't say it to this point. But of all the fandoms that I have, Godzilla, second of course Voluntaryist, but Godzilla is my biggest. I have a huge Godzilla collection. All the movies, all this other stuff. So of course I saw Godzilla G-1 multiple times in theaters. I saw it in black and white. Just an incredible movie. Really, I think the best movie of last year. It won an Oscar for VFX the other night, which was incredible. And one of the reasons why I thought it was such a great movie was for the libertarian themes in it, actually, which is hard to find. And those libertarian themes included having an anti-war message, having a pro-human life message, having a pro-private action message, criticizing the government, saying that the government lies and manipulates people, and people have to take things in their own hands if they want to solve problems. It was incredible. And there was no SJW nonsense in it either. So that was a big reason why I think it was so popular. It was not only was it really fun with the characters and the action, but the message, the underlying principles, it was just unheard of, really. I mean, and I can't even think of a movie that had so many different libertarian themes with it in the past 10 years. It's really something else. So it's just something that you got to see. It's a fantastic movie. I can't hype it up enough. But it's hard to find something that so consistently, does that. You have V for Vendetta, this or that, and there's Hunger Games, this or that, but even those are still not as strong consistently the libertarian themes, I think, as G-1 was, surprisingly, which is, I think will be a shock to a lot of people.
I will point out that the libertarianism of the Hunger Games novels is much more explicit than the movies. Yes. But really, yeah, it's interesting too, anime, Godzilla, both came out of Japan originally.
It's effective nuclear bombs. Yeah. What do you know? Godzilla, its creation was both in fiction and in reality a product of nuclear war. So
yes, it was. Yeah. That's
it's a good reminder, and that's a special, I think, psychological construct for Japanese people, that they uniquely in those regions, experience the horrors of that. And so because of that, they have a special distaste, I think, for war because of that.
Yeah, I wonder, Jack, it's like, sometimes I think those messages that are more subtle, just, I wonder, would I be as anti-war as I am now if I hadn't seen every episode of MASH by the time I was 12? And MASH isn't, it's just about, a hospital in the middle of a war, but it's just, I mean, but there's a story and there's characters around it too, which I think helps. Yeah. So what's in the future for Jack Lloyd and his projects? What do you think you'll be doing next? It sounds like you're able to do this full time, which is good.
Well, I do other work as well. I have many ways that I do work, but certainly I am, working on a full-time scale for Liberty. And, considering all the work I do, it's just, that's how many hours I work. I'm putting in the grind every day. So on the horizon already, we're going to be fulfilling our kids book that we just completed, The Unschooled Adventures of Jack and Fuzz. So we're getting ready. I believe we should have that getting wrapped up this upcoming weekend. So we'll be sending out people their perks. It is available on Amazon print on demand as well if people want to get it. But we're doing that campaign special fulfillment. We're going to be going to the studio to record another song coming up. It's a top secret song, so I wish I could tell you, but it's going to be a good one. So buckle up for our next song that we're recording. And then we have our End the Fed music video. that we are going to be doing the campaign for. So getting that all shored up, and it's a super cool campaign. There's lots of ways to have fun with it. Joining in, we have stickers, shirts, coasters. We're going to be having actually our End the Fed and Taxation Stuff coasters, the nice ones, which are, let me see here. Yeah, I have one of these.
Everybody's putting out their own swag now, whether it be coasters, coffee mugs. Yeah, that's all that stuff out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are super cool. We've actually used these for many years, so we can vouch for them, that they hold up, they wash easy, they have nice, no slip bottom. We love them, so we stand by them. So we're going to have those. And then, of course, people can get credit in the music video. So if someone wants to promote their show, a podcast, a business, we have regular credits and, executive producer credits for that too. So we'll be gearing up with that, probably launching that in just over a week. But people could go on to Indiegogo and I believe they could look up End the Fed right now, and it should come up for a sign up. So if someone wants to get notified when we launch, which will be coming up soon, they can, get the sign up there. But otherwise, we'll be promoting it. We have a teaser trailer for that that'll be coming out, just over a week, and we'll be, working to, shore up that so that we can shoot it in DC. So we want to shoot this music video in DC, so we can be around the Federal Reserve Building. Hopefully, they don't try to disappear us. We'll shoot around the public sidewalks as best we can, and try to avoid the Fed cams. But we're excited for those things. And then later on this year, we'll have continuations of the projects. We'll be working on our second kids book. We'll have the next Voluntaryist campaign for Suit Saga 2 once we do the fulfillment on this current issue, which we're wrapping up the final elements to that as we speak. And once that's all completed and shipped out, then we'll launch the next campaign. So,
your cover on the Unschool Adventures, you remind me a lot of Captain Kirk on there.
Because the black and yellow? Or...
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Yeah, just the colors. Kind of looks like the Kirk in his uniform. Yeah.
Yeah, black and yellow only comes in certain seasons. You got like Curious George and all that stuff. You got Dick Tracy, but yeah, we have our black and yellow themes that goes throughout our work, obviously, and as you can see there, a whole little
and of course you got Fo, who's also working with you on all this stuff too. I think it helps a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and we have the nonfiction books too, as always, A Vision for a Libertarian Future. I have Philosophical Voluntarism, and my flagship book, The Definitive Guide to Libertarian Voluntarism, very popular. Definitely worth checking out on Amazon. Got lots of great reviews because it just helps distill the principles.
Voluntarism seems to becoming the good word I use if people are turned off by the word libertarian, which doesn't necessarily have to be associated with the party. In my view, you can be, or sometimes I'll just say he's an ideological libertarian or a small L libertarian. But yeah, it's but there's a lot of good work going out there. Yeah, it's been very interesting. Has all your stuff been in English so far?
Yes, most everything we've done has just been English.
Okay.
One video we had a Spanish translation on that FUD did called "Dear Mexican Immigrants, Why Did You Flee Mexico?" on YouTube, which is a great video talking about the principles of liberty in Spanish.
Well, that's good stuff. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good work to be done there too. And I don't know I don't know if Fo's parents coming from Southeast Asia. I don't know if she has another language there too. You could do work in that language. But yeah, we'll see.
She could speak some elementary Cantonese, a little bit of Vietnamese. She used to speak Vietnamese when she was a kid, apparently, but she's forgotten that. But her mom is a polyglot, and she could speak several different languages. She can use Mandarin, Cantonese, English, Vietnamese, and maybe even something else. But yeah.
Well, since you're writing kids' books, I got to ask, any plans to have little Jacks or little Foes around or not?
Definitely, yes. We've been working this past year specifically in preparation for having kids, doing everything we can just to kind of prepare, taking care of physical health, finances, counseling. Later on this year, we'll do more serious health checks and stuff like that before, getting ready.
Oh, yeah.
So the aim is maybe by the end of this year that we'll be physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, totally ready. And I know that obviously people say you can never be fully ready, but we do believe that it's possible to plan and have a pregnancy at an opportune time. That is certainly, you could certainly plan for a lot of things, and make sure that you're ready for it. So that's what we're doing.
Well, I think you can really I think sometimes libertarians can be a good model and figure out how, way to raise kids. Cause I think in a lot of ways our relationships with each other define, in some ways, spill over into the political culture. I worry. I don't know if you've seen a lot, but I have a lot of conversations on here about the whole war between men and women that's going on in the West right now. And I think it's very unfortunate, but well, we'll see how that works out. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's an artificial construct the government creates to divide people. It's how it always is psychological warfare, so that people are constantly pitted against each other over race, class, income, you name it. Because as long as people are fighting each other over nonsensical stuff, then the government's winning, because they're just still reeling in their money and taking our taxes, going to war, destroying us, enslaving us. So yeah, we like to sidestep a lot of these nonsensical battles, although I guess maybe we'll engage in the pineapple on pizza battle as necessary, but but yeah, we like to just get back to basics and to principles and help people think about how to have better relationships through nonviolent communication and healing trauma, and doing so in a non mystical way, and doing so through understanding oneself, self-knowledge, and other things like that. So
well, I think it's a good point to wrap up here. Do you have anything else you want to say before we go?
Sure. If you want to connect with what it is that we're doing, otherwise, Jack, JCK, Jack V as in Voluntaryist, Lloyd, LLOYD, jackvlloyd.com. That's where you can connect with me and my work. You can see our latest music videos and other projects we're working on. You can also check out my comic series, volcomic.com, V as in Voluntaryist, VOLCOMIC, volcomic.com. You can check out my wife's website, the THEPHO, like pho, the Vietnamese dish, instead of I, PHOLOSOPHER, thepholosopher.com.
Yes.
And yeah, you'll be able to connect with all our social medias and all the stuff we do, because we're everywhere. There's so many places. It's kind of ridiculous. So
yeah, you are everywhere, and you seem to be touching a lot of the different libertarian networks out there, which is what I'm trying to do too. So there's a lot of good work to be done. So yeah, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, check out my Substack. I have a novel called Escape from the Village. Thank you, Jack Lloyd. It's been a good conversation out here. And of course, we'll keep our eye on what's going on with Milei. Maybe you can make a trip down there sometime too. It's an amazing place.
You never know. We might even go perform a song down there if they invite us. We'll do it.
Yeah, and it's really cool that you might have actually had a hand in this, and I'm trying to think, who might have made a difference, but I'm Chris Baker, and we're out. Thank you very much, Jack Lloyd. It's been great having you.